Blog Talk Radio. This is Dare to be Authentic Talk Radio Worldwide with relationship coach, life coach, and author Mari Mitchell. Broadcasting live from Southern California.
Hi, and welcome to Dare to be Authentic Radio. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm your host, Mari Mitchell, and I have a very special guest, Sara Schley. She's going to be talking about her challenges with bipolar 2 brain and her passion for saving lives, ending the stigma, and optimizing health. She wrestled almost 40 years with shame, and Sara is now boldly speaking out about what her life has been like with bipolar 2 brain. And she also believes that authenticity has been everything to her, and she's a leader of Seed Systems, an international consulting collaborative that she founded in 1994 to create a regenerative, inclusive, and kinder world. Welcome to the show, Sara. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mari. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you learned to stay healthy with a bipolar 2 brain.
Okay, well, thank you. It's I think the story we'll focus on is the one related to bipolar because, of course, it's a lot longer story than that. But
right.
But I was, I come from a family where my mother had depression and my grandfather had depression, but I had no sign of that until I was 21, and I was, quite the kind of successful kid. I was Ivy Leaguer, an athlete, a scholar. I was headed to medical school. I had a 4.0. And then, slam, as if somebody had switched a light. My brain, literally felt like I had a brain breakdown. Or
wow.
Sometimes I've been saying it's like I felt like an alien had abducted with my brain. And suddenly simple tasks like adding 2 plus 2, doing laundry, or, being willing to see my friends, or really anything became arduously, excruciatingly difficult.
That's crazy.
So, you want me to keep going? I'll just keep going.
Yes.
With that. So long story shorter, because we're talking about resilience, it took me 25 years, if you can believe it, Mari, to learn that the brain pattern I have is something called bipolar 2 on the bipolar spectrum. And it was, it took so long to diagnose because bipolar 2 kind of masquerades as regular depression, as regular clinical depression. When you have the kind of brain that I have and you show up in a doctor's office or a therapist's office, you look, exceedingly depressed, lethargic, low mood, no joy in life, no, like suicidal ideation, et cetera. And so a standard doctor will think that you're depressed and give you something like Prozac for depression.
Right.
But, and stop me anytime you want with a question, the problem with that is, in my case, where you actually have a bipolar brain, those depression drugs like Prozac, often known as SSRIs, they'll actually make you worse. And in my case, it was like poison for my brain. So It took 25 years and 5 psychiatrists, and finally the 5th psychiatrist who studied the bipolar brain recognized that what I have actually is what it is. And he was the first one to diagnose me with bipolar on the bipolar spectrum and give me the right medications that really saved my life.
My gosh. So how long did that take for you?
Well, again, the first time I had my first breakdown, I was 21. I didn't get diagnosed till I was 46, so 25 years. And then, which is crazy because people die in the interim. I had lots of excruciating, months and months and years on end that were extremely difficult. And I talk about that in detail in the book, which we can talk about more later. But, once I was finally diagnosed, and it's interesting, like if somebody has the right, lens on their brain or mental model or perspective, whatever you want to say, because my doctor, Dr. Perlman, knew to look for bipolar, he gave me a questionnaire and he found it in 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, discovered what had eluded the medical world for 25 years. So it wasn't long once he gave me the right diagnosis, then 3 months on the medication that healed me. And it was like a light switch went back on again and I was back.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so sorry that you went through all those years of being misdiagnosed or not correctly diagnosed. But I'm glad that you did find the right doctor to give you the correct diagnosis. So tell us a little bit about staying healthy. I know there's things that you've learned and are doing for yourself and helping others to learn to do to stay healthy with the bipolar 2 brain.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And I know you're a life coach, and I am in some situations too. So, you know, it's not unlike probably what you teach, Mari, with that a lot of basic disciplines. I like to call mine practices for a healthy brain, and I have the acronym PECS because I think that's kind of, you know, cute. Let's get our muscles stronger, our pecs stronger. But it stands for physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual, PECS, right? And what happens, I think the practices that I use are powerful for anyone with a brain, right? It's going to help anybody. It's just in my case, in cases like mine, I have to take it super seriously or I'm going to be on the other end of a bipolar breakdown. So I'm exquisitely disciplined. But the good thing about that is that I can help teach other people, you know, what's going to work for them and then make them feel better anyway. You know, and I like to say, like right now, like, you know, who do you know who has not experienced anxiety, depression, or stress in the last 2 years since COVID started? You know, raise your hands. Right? Yeah. I mean, everybody has experienced some form of anxiety, depression, or stress. And I'm saying this lightly, but it's pretty terrifying and sad. Just yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, the Surgeon General, I'm going to mispronounce his name, forgive me, Murtha, I think, he came out with an official statement naming a mental health crisis among our youth since COVID started and before, where the incidence of suicidal ideation, of anxiety and depression is through the roof. So all of these practices are going to be good for anybody. You know, and if we had more time, it'd be like I'd show you mine and you'd show me yours. But I would say one of the other things I like to say is that, you know, I was raised with a first gen dad who was driven, and the family culture was work, 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 think later, right? But the problem with work, 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 think later is that you never take time to feel or sense what else you might need, and it's a recipe for burnout. Yes, so I was work, 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 think later, and then burn out my already bipolar brain that I didn't know I had. And so what's evolved for me over time is instead of work, 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 think later, which I think is a driven stance all about achievement, now it's like, let's look for balance. And now my goal, instead of just strict achievement, is balance. And then I say balance in those 4 worlds of physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. When I wake up every morning, I happen to have a prayer practice. People have different things they do. Mine's based in gratitude. But then at the end of that, I do like a little inventory looking at my day ahead. And I'll look at and I'll say, okay, where am I going to get my physical? That's sports. That's aerobics. That's some kind of athleticism in my day. Where am I getting my emotional? That's some connection with a real person in my day. Where am I getting my creative? That would be something along the lines of writing or singing or, you know, doing pottery or playing piano or whatever it is that is regenerative to my creative mind. And then the S, spiritual. Where am I getting that, you know, sense of connection to something larger than myself? And I literally look at my calendar in my mind. I'll pick up my iPhone after morning yoga, and I'll say, okay, check yoga. I've done something physical, but where else is that going to happen? Oh, I don't have time. I literally did this today, Mari. I had a shadow work coaching client that was going to go right up to 3. I'm on East Coast time when you and I were supposed to meet. And when I saw that, I'm like, I got to tell him I can only do till 2:30 because I need that half an hour brain break. Right. You know, like in the old days, I wouldn't have been aware enough to take that time. I would have worked right up to 2:59. Yep. You know, but instead, my goal now is balance, spaciousness. You know, make sure that I've got all of those elements in. So in the half an hour, I got to eat lunch instead I wouldn't have. Yes, exactly. So that's the kind of thing.
I love what you're saying. I love everything you're saying, Sarah, because that balance is so important. And I grew up also in a family with really great work ethic. Not that it's a bad thing to have good work ethics, but again, I would work, not take care of myself. And I love that you said to your client, you know what, we have to break at 2:30 today, and that you took that time to take care of yourself because you are the embodiment of what you've learned and of what you teach. And we can get away from that. You know, even if we know it, if we teach it, if we've lived it, it's easy to get caught up and forget to take care of ourselves. So that's such a great reminder, even for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to just overdrive my brain fatigue, right? I would just plow right through it because I had work. And a lot of people do that, right? And I wasn't aware that I was setting myself up for burnout. And some people burn out, you burn out. In my case, burnout is a bipolar episode, right? So I now have to I'm more tuned into when that fatigue is happening, I'm unplugging, you know. Yeah. And it's funny because I have twins who are now about to turn 20, believe it or not. And when they were little and I was starting to build my awareness around this, I had this thing that we called a 3 F's nap, okay? And 3 F's stands for fire, flood, or fatality. You don't wake up mom unless it's one of those 3 things, okay? And the thing was, it would only be 20 minutes. It's a power nap, okay? It's essential to my brain and spirit health. But so they would laugh about it. And then as they got to be teenagers, they're like, okay, guys, they'd say to me, Mom, do you need a 3 F's? Meaning you start to sound a little irritable or something. Like they would be the person that would remind me of what my practice was.
Oh, wow. That's so amazing. And for 20 minutes, I mean, they're going to be okay, you know, unless they're infants, they're going to be okay.
And of course, when they're little, somebody's watching them. But, you know, otherwise, you know, sometimes young moms think I have to be available all the time. You know, well, that's just a recipe for burnout. And it's good for the kids to learn boundaries. And it's good that for them to see, oh, mom has self-care needs, because then they'll practice it when they get older. And, you know, literally it's 20 minutes. I set my watch because there's this whole thing about power napping, which is another maybe, you know, show with you. But there's evidence that shows that, you know, that 18, 20-minute sweet spot, it acts like a vacuum cleaner in your brain, and it sucks out the metabolic waste and gives you this really regenerative thing that I find and lots of people find to be really important. So I've learned that I can just feel it now when I need one, you know, and I didn't used to. I just used to overdrive that switch.
Yeah, of course. Wow, that's pretty awesome. We're going to have to talk about that another time because I don't like taking because I go more than 20 minutes. If I ever do, it's a miracle if I take a nap, but then I wake up more tired. So I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, no, you got to you literally have to set your watch. You set your timer on your iPhone and you don't let it go for more than 20.
Interesting.
That's another story.
Yes, that's another story. So let's talk a little bit about the role that authenticity has played for you in all of this, Sarah.
Okay. Well, you know, Mari, it took a long time because there's such a huge stigma around mental health and mental illness. And particularly around bipolar, I think I was talking about this with my grown nieces the other day at Thanksgiving, was like, people are starting to accept depression. They used to never say that, but that's okay. But when you say bipolar, people think, oh, man, she's scary, she's crazy, stay away.
Right.
So, you know, the stigma kept me from being authentic in the sense that it kept me from telling my full truth, you know, all the way to like 6 months ago, you know, and over time I started telling more people, you know, I started telling more friends, I started telling, you know, but my parents, my family started to know and close friends knew, but I still kept it from my clients and my colleagues. I was afraid to tell my professional circle that I was bipolar. I was afraid to lose clients because of stigma. You know, I kept it in. That was the one place that I wasn't authentic, even though I was authentic in every other aspect. And then during COVID, I don't know what happened, but, well, I do know what happened. It's in the book. I don't know if you get into the whole thing, but there was a moment where I decided that it was time and important to share my story in full. And it happened over time, different stories, but there were a number of one kind of pivotal moment, watershed moment was I had written this memoir over years about my bipolar situation. I'm a writer and I've written other stuff. But I've been too scared to share it because of just what I said. I was too scared to come out with full story, fearing the stigma.
Right.
Well, I was with a friend. Long story short, we were having a beer at the end of a day after some adventure outdoors. And she told me, tragically, that her nephew had taken his own life the summer before.
Oh.
And they think that he might have been bipolar, and they didn't know. I immediately said, I'm bipolar 2. And she was like, what, you? Which is typically the response to people who didn't know me, because my self that they're familiar with is the upbeat, energetic self, not the bipolar depressed self. Long story short, she's an editor. She said, I'll edit it for free in honor of my nephew.
Wow.
And then thus became me getting more serious about the publication of the book, and then a lot of good stuff happened. And then my kids, who were then 18, said, you got to do this, Mom. It's going to save lives. And then I thought, well, if they said I have to. COVID came, and there was an exponential incidence of suicidal ideation and people going through with it. I'm like, now's the time.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. I love it because, like you said, people will be healed. People are being healed. And anytime we speak out about something that we're suffering from, there's other people who are suffering as well. We don't know how many. And most of them also are not telling anybody, right, because of stigma. But the people's lives that you will save just by coming forth and, of course, offering your book is just amazing, Sara. We're going to take a quick break. And if you want to call in and ask Sara a question or talk to her, you're welcome to call. The lines are open. The number is 929-477-3869. That's 929-477-3869. You can start calling now, and we'll be right back.
Frustrated by right-wing pundits demonizing award-winning books in the classroom and even in book club circles? Mark Daniels' compassionate and nurturing counter-firebrand title, Weed Out Hate, Plant a Rose, will open your heart and ignite spirits, lifting you out of the social networking bonfire and into a better place. Weed Out Hate, Plant a Rose, available through Amazon and other online retailers.
Love Remembers was an inspiration motivated by deep feelings for my Grandma Ida and Uncle Bob. Unresolved grief can cause depression. The decline of brain capacities can be avoided by the special bond and special communication from the grandchild and the grandparent sharing memories. This provides education for the grandchild and healing for the elderly. Keep them sharp by practicing the exercises in the book to prevent dementia. LoveRemembers.net and BrainSproutsMemory.com.
We're back on Dare to Be Authentic Radio. I'm your host, Mari Mitchell, with special guest Sara Schley, talking about her challenges with bipolar 2 brain and her passion for saving lives and ending the stigma of this disease. So let's talk a little bit, Sara, about what your main message that you want to bring to the public is today.
Well, the book has a mission, and I realize it's not only the mission of the book, it's now my own mission, and it's 3 things. 1 is end the stigma we've been talking about. 2 is save lives. And 3 is offer practices to optimize healing, like I was saying before, the PECs, physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. So So that's the main message. And then I think the end the stigma part is everything around what we've been saying. Look, I got the DNA for this brain. My mother had it. My grandfather had it. Who knows before them that had it? I pray my kids don't. But there's no fault of mine. And on the contrary, I'm a survivor, Mari. Like, it's time to raise my flag and honoring the path that I've taken. And I around End the Stigma, right before I was going to come out with the book, I still had this little niggling thing around fear of coming out. And my editor did a brilliant thing, and she said, look, you have an assignment. I want you to go home and write this. I'm bipolar and a better person because of it. And I did the assignment, and I came up with 4 things that this, brain that I've been wrestling with for 40 years has taught me. 1 is compassion. I will never judge you because I've been in the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
2 is a kind of emotional fearlessness, which is basically there's nothing you can bring to me that's going to scare me because my brain has done me worse. I've been to hell and back.
Wow.
3 is discipline. Like I said, it's like I know what's on the other side of not taking care of myself, so I'm like uber disciplined. And then 4 is gratitude, because every day that my brain's working is a good day.
Yeah.
So those things have equipped me in a way to be a good person, and I'm proud of it, And so that helps end the stigma. And then in terms of the optimized healing thing in the book and, in my practices around coaching, are all those double click on various physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual practices, like we were saying, power napping. And then the third one is around saving lives. And I don't think we've talked about this specifically yet in this half hour, but one of the things that's so insidious is that, okay, my brain is on the bipolar spectrum. Have you ever heard of the bipolar spectrum before we chatted?
Never. Not at all.
No one has. I never have met a single person that's not in the field, and even those who are. Like my therapist, she said, you have to write this book because people don't know. So
That's right.
It turns out that there is a bipolar spectrum. It's not just black and white. And why this is going to save lives is because if you are misdiagnosed, when I show up at the doctor and I look depressed and I'm misdiagnosed and they give me the wrong drugs, that's going to make my broken brain even worse.
Wow.
And it turns out, sadly, the incidence of suicide in people with a bipolar spectrum brain, in my case bipolar 2, is higher than the incidence of suicide in bipolar 1 or regular depression. Because when you get the wrong drugs, it makes you crazy. Like for me, I felt like my brain was like shaking against my skull. It made me more psychotic, more night sweats, terrors, anxious, stuff I'd never experienced before, even with my depressions. So the wrong drugs can be lethal, and the right diagnosis might save your life.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about saving lives.
Absolutely. That's wonderful that you're doing this. Yeah, like you said moments ago, I never heard of a bipolar spectrum. So this is this is like groundbreaking information, but why don't we hear about it? Why does nobody know about it? And I'm so glad.
And further, here's another quiz for you. When it comes to psychiatric medication like Prozac or other SSRIs, who do you think writes the most scripts, the most prescriptions for those in the country? Like what kind of doctor?
I imagine a psychiatrist.
And you would, and so did I. But guess what? It's not. It's a regular PCP, your primary care physician, the family doc. They're the ones across the country that are writing Prozac scripts because, A, the patient does not want to go to a psychiatrist because that is a stigma. They go to their doctor, doc, I haven't been feeling good. Or they live in what's called a mental health desert. I've heard there's such a thing now where there's no psychiatrist for 8 hours. So they go to their doc, I haven't been feeling good. And people who are primary care docs think nothing really, I think a lot of them, of just writing a script for Prozac. And the problem is that they're going to be doing harm. They're going to be doing harm a lot of the times.
Wow.
So I have a heroic doctor named Dr. James Phelps, who's been a mentor of mine, and he's written several books on the bipolar spectrum, clinical books, for doctors. And his mission in life, along with some of his colleagues, is really to help primary care physicians, therapists, nurses, coaches, like the frontline person who might see someone look depressed, understand, don't just think this is regular depression. This could be anywhere on the spectrum.
Wow.
See?
That's amazing.
So I know. It's a big wow. I mean, and I have to say, that's why I changed the subtitle of my book to say on the bipolar spectrum, because I wanted people to say, look at that and go, what? Well, now we know there's a sexuality spectrum. We didn't know that a generation ago. Now we know there's an autism spectrum. We didn't know that a generation ago. Well, maybe now we're going to figure out there's a bipolar brain spectrum, and maybe that will help.
Yeah.
It will help.
Wow.
A lot of people.
So Sara's book is called Brainstorm, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, because we hadn't talked about the name of that, but the book. So Sara, tell us how to get a hold of you and your book.
Okay. Well, you can reach me on my author website called sarahschley.com, which is just the spelling of my name, which isn't obvious, so I'll spell it out. It's Sara, no H, S-A-R-A, and then the last name is S-C-L-E-Y, SaraSchley.com. And there, if you go and sign up, you can be the first one to know when the hardcover and softcover and audiobooks show up, which should be hopefully later this month in December. We'll have those nice hardcovers in our hands, or at the latest it'll be by mid-January if there's a line at the publishers. But we're getting really close, and I'm really excited. And if you go to my website, you'll see the cover, which I think it turned out really beautiful, and I'm really happy with it.
It is beautiful. I love it. And
SaraSchley.com.
SaraSchley.com. You can also find Sara on my website, lifecoachmari.com. That's lifecoachmari.com. Click on the radio show page. She's already there with her picture, a link to this interview, and a link to her website. And so, speaking of link to this interview, this is a live interview, but it's being recorded and will be available as a replay right after. So if you know people that might benefit from the information, please pass this interview along. Very good. So, Sara, is there one last thing you'd like to say to a listener today, something that's deeply on your heart?
I would just say, if you're out there and you're suffering from a brutal depression that's relentless and it seems like nothing's working, there is help. It may be that you're on the bipolar spectrum. I want to encourage you to go to a therapist, a psychiatrist, a mental health professional, get the help you need. And it is possible to live a full and rich life with a bipolar or other kind of depression brain. You can do that, 4 elements of help: medication, therapy, support from your family, friends, and then the 4th thing, doing those good self-care practices. You deserve it. You're worth it. You shouldn't suffer another minute.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as the stigma? What can we all do to break through that?
You mean in terms of judgment of others or of ourselves?
Yes, get rid of the stigma that's ridiculous, that is just is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, if you are a person who's suffering from some kind of a mental health challenge, and I'm really careful not to say mental illness, and you'll note I also say, I never say I'm bipolar. I say I have a bipolar brain, because this is not my identity, right? It's a physical attribute. So I'm just going to say, you got whatever you got dealt, be proud of it, right? If you're wrestling with that kind of a brain and you're still here today, you deserve to own it and be proud and stand up. And if you're somebody else who's never had this experience, it's going to be hard to relate. It's going to be hard to understand because you've never had a brain like that. Right. I'm just going to invite you to go to compassion.
I like that.
Step towards compassion and away from judgment.
Very good. We need that all together in our lives anyway, just in general, especially these days. I think we need a lot more compassion for others. It has seemed to kind of gone down a notch the last couple of years.
Yeah, no kidding.
Back up the spectrum, back up that ladder. Very good. Well, Sara, it has been such a pleasure to have you on your show and on my show. Thanks for coming on and for sharing so deeply and authentically what you've been through. And I can tell that your heart is for healing and helping people. And I look forward to much success of your book and to more and more people learning about that there is such thing as a bipolar spectrum. Never knew there was such a. And listeners, thank you for listening in. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Mara, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for your generosity in bringing me into this conversation and for the great work that you're doing out there. And I want to wish you all the success, too.
Thank you so much. And thank you for listening in to Dare to Be Authentic Radio. Make sure you catch us next time. Bye for now.
This is Dare to Be Authentic Talk Radio Worldwide with relationship coach, life coach, and author Mari Mitchell. Broadcasting live from Southern California.